My father didn't even step aside when he said it. He just blocked the doorway with his arm like I was a delivery he didn't remember ordering. "Did you bring the $300? He asked, loud enough for my stepmother and my half-siblings to hear from inside. $300. To walk into the house I grew up in. My breath froze in the December air as embarrassment flushed through me. Behind him, the Christmas tree glowed warm and perfect. Everything I wasn't allowed to touch anymore. I swallowed hard. "Dad, it's Christmas." He shrugged like I'd asked him about the weather. "Rules are rules, Natalie. Family contributes. If you can't pay, you're not coming inside." And that was the moment the humiliation burned so deep it carved itself into my bones. Standing on that porch, watching neighbors pass by with their wrapped gifts and warm smiles, I felt smaller than I'd ever felt in my life. That's when I knew this Christmas was going to change everything. My name is Natalie Parker, and this is how my own father turned Christmas into a pay-to-enter event, and how I made him pay a price he never calculated. The cold bit at my face, but the shame burned hotter. Behind Dad's shoulder, I could see my stepmother Diana peeking from the kitchen window with a smirk like this was prime entertainment for her morning. I stood frozen on that porch while the world kept moving around me. Mrs. Henderson from next door walked past with a tray of cookies, pretending she hadn't heard anything. But I saw her eyes flicker toward me before she quickly looked away. Dad tapped the doorframe impatiently, his wedding ring clicking against the wood. "If you can't afford to pitch in, then go home, Natalie." That word, afford, stabbed me harder than the December wind ever could. He knew I was struggling after losing my apartment 3 months ago. He knew I'd been staying with my friend Cassie, sleeping on her couch and saving every penny from my receptionist job. He knew every insecurity I carried, every wound that hadn't healed since Mom died. And he weaponized every single one of them. Behind him, I could hear my half-brother Tyler laughing at something on TV. Diana called out, "Is she coming in or what? The ham is getting cold." Dad's jaw tightened. "That depends on whether she brought her contribution." My hands trembled as I dug into my coat pocket, feeling the empty fabric. I'd spent my last $40 on gas and the small gift I'd wrapped for Tyler and his sister Bethany. The gift that was sitting in my car right now, gathering frost. "I don't have $300, I whispered, hating how small my voice sounded. Dad sighed like I'd disappointed him once again, which seemed to be my only talent in his eyes these days. "Then I guess you'll have to try again next year. Maybe save up." The dismissal in his tone hit me like a slap. He started to close the door and panic flared in my chest. This couldn't be happening. Not on Christmas. Not after everything. "Dad, please," I heard myself say, and I hated the begging in my voice. "I brought gifts. I just thought." "You thought wrong." He cut me off cleanly like trimming a loose thread. "Diana and I discussed this at Thanksgiving. Everyone contributes to holiday expenses. Your brother and sister understand that. Why can't you?" "Because Tyler is 16 and Bethany is 13, I wanted to scream. "Because they don't pay for anything. Because you pay their phones, their clothes, their college funds while I've been on my own since I turned 18. But I didn't say any of that. Instead, I turned away, my cheeks burning with a shame so hot it felt like fever. The porch steps creaked under my boots as I walked back toward my beaten Honda in the driveway. Behind me, I heard the door click shut. Not slam, just a quiet final click that somehow hurt worse than any shouting could have. I sat in my car for 10 minutes, engine running, heat blasting, unable to make myself drive away. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Dad wasn't always like this. When Mom was alive, he laughed more. He'd carry me on his shoulders and call me his little warrior. We'd make pancakes on Saturday mornings while Mom slept in, and he'd let me flip them even when I made a mess. But when Mom died in that accident when I was 14, something in him died too. Within a year, he'd married Diana, a woman who smiled with her mouth but never her eyes. She brought Tyler and Bethany into our house, and suddenly there wasn't room for me anymore. I became the ghost in my own home. The reminder of a life he wanted to forget. Christmas used to be magic. Mom would string lights everywhere and play Bing Crosby records while we decorated cookies. After she died, Christmas became Diana's showcase. Her perfect children opening expensive gifts while I got clearance rack sweaters that never fit quite right. But entry fees? This was new. This was something else entirely. This was Dad drawing a line and daring me to cross it. This was him putting a price tag on my place in the family, and deciding I wasn't worth the discount. I pulled out my phone and stared at the last text message Dad had sent me 2 weeks ago. Christmas at our place. Bring $300 for your share of expenses. Everyone's chipping in this year. Everyone. I'd asked Tyler about it when I ran into him at the grocery store. He'd looked confused. What fee? Dad bought all our presents already. So it wasn't everyone. It was just me. I scrolled further back through our message history. It was mostly one-sided, me reaching out, him responding with short, cold replies. Busy. Can't talk now. Maybe next month. The last real conversation we'd had was 6 months ago when I lost my apartment. I'd called him crying, asking if I could stay with them for a few weeks until I got back on my feet. Diana's mother is visiting, he'd said flatly. There's no room. You'll figure it out. You always do. I'd figured it out by begging Cassie to let me crash on her couch. By working double shifts at the medical office where I answered phones. By eating ramen and skipping meals so I could save up for a new security deposit. And now he wanted $300 just to sit at his table on Christmas. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I did something else entirely. I started thinking. The shame that had burned so hot in my chest began to cool into something sharper. Something focused. I wasn't going to beg for a place at a table I'd helped set for 26 years. I wasn't going to let him make me feel worthless one more time. If Dad wanted to treat family like a business transaction, then I'd show him exactly how business worked. I turned off the engine and pulled out my phone again. This time I wasn't looking at text messages. I was looking at photos. Specifically, photos I'd taken 6 months ago when I was helping Dad clean out his home office. He'd been complaining about needing to organize his files for tax season. I'd offered to help because I was still trying to be the good daughter, still trying to earn his approval like it was something I could win if I just worked hard enough. While sorting through boxes of old paperwork, I'd noticed something odd. Tax returns from years ago back when I was in college. Forms with my name on them claiming me as a dependent. Forms from years when I wasn't living at home at all. Years when I was 3 states away at school, paying my own tuition with loans and scholarships. I'd taken photos of those documents, not really knowing why at the time. Just instinct. Just that little voice that said keep records, save everything, protect yourself. Now I knew why. I drove to Cassie's apartment in a daze, my mind spinning with possibilities. She was decorating her tiny tree when I walked in, still wearing my coat and boots. That was fast, she said, looking up from a box of ornaments. Then she saw my face. Oh no. What happened? I told her everything. About the door, the fee, the humiliation. About Dad's coldness and Diana's smirk and the way he'd closed that door like I was nothing. Cassie's face went from sympathetic to furious in seconds. $300? On Christmas? That's insane. It's not about the money, I said, finally taking off my coat. It's about control. It's about him showing me I'm not really family anymore. So what are you going to do? I pulled out my phone and showed her the photos I'd taken months ago. I'm going to show him that control works both ways. Cassie studied the tax forms on my screen, her eyes widening as she understood. Natalie, is this legal? What he did? Claiming a dependent who doesn't live with you and you don't support? Not exactly illegal if there's some gray area, but definitely worth investigating. Especially since he's claimed me for multiple years when I wasn't living there. Are you going to report him? I sat down on her couch, feeling the weight of what I was considering. I don't know yet. But I'm done being powerless. I'm done letting him treat me like I'm worthless. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Mom, about what she would say if she could see us now. She'd be heartbroken. She'd raised me to be strong, to stand up for myself, to never let anyone make me feel small. But she'd also raised me to be kind. To forgive. To choose love over anger. Except there was a difference between forgiveness and letting yourself be destroyed. There was a difference between kindness and being a doormat. I got up and made coffee at 2 a.m, sitting at Cassie's kitchen table with my laptop. I started researching tax law, dependent claims, and IRS investigations. The more I read, the clearer the picture became. Dad had been sloppy. He ran his contracting business the same way he ran his life. Assuming no one would ever question him, assuming his authority was absolute. But I'd always been observant. I'd always noticed details other people missed. And I'd kept every piece of paper he'd ever shoved at me, every document he'd told me to deal with when I moved out. I had his signature on forms declaring I lived with him when I had lease agreements proving I lived 3 states away. I had his tax returns claiming thousands in deductions for supporting me when I had student loan statements showing I'd supported myself. It wasn't much, but it was enough to ask questions. And sometimes questions were more powerful than accusations. The next morning, I drove to the community center where I'd just been offered a new position starting in January. The director, Mrs. Patterson, had been my high school counselor years ago. She remembered me as the quiet girl who always volunteered, who helped organize fundraisers and tutored younger students. When I'd run into her last month and mentioned I was looking for better work, she'd immediately offered me a role as program coordinator. Better pay, benefits, and most importantly, respect. "Natalie," she greeted me warmly when I arrived. "I didn't expect to see you until after the holidays. Is everything okay?" I hesitated, then told her a simplified version of what happened. Mrs. Patterson's expression darkened. "That's unconscionable," she said. "Charging your own child an entry fee for Christmas. I'm so sorry." "I need advice," I admitted. "Not about the fee. About something else." I showed her the tax documents on my phone. Mrs. Patterson had worked with the IRS before becoming a counselor. She understood these things better than I did. She studied the forms carefully, her lips pressing into a thin line. "This is problematic. If you weren't his dependent during these years, claiming you could constitute fraud. What should I do?" She looked at me seriously. "That depends on what you want to accomplish. Do you want justice? Or revenge?" I thought about her question all day. Justice versus revenge. Were they the same thing? Or was there a line between them I needed to be careful not to cross? By evening I'd made my decision. I didn't want to destroy Dad. Despite everything, some part of me still loved the man he used to be, the father who'd carried me on his shoulders and made pancakes. But I did want him to understand that actions have consequences. That you can't treat people like they're disposable and expect them to keep coming back. I spent the next 3 days organizing everything. I made copies of the tax forms. I cross-referenced them with my college records, my lease agreements, my bank statements. I built a timeline that showed exactly when I wasn't living at home and exactly when Dad claimed I was. I didn't contact the IRS. Not yet. That would be the nuclear option, and I wanted to give Dad a chance to make this right on his own terms. Instead, I wrapped all the documents in a folder, put the folder in a red gift bag with tissue paper, and attached a simple card that said, "For Dad. Open privately." It wasn't a threat. It wasn't blackmail. It was just truth wrapped up like a present. Sometimes truth was the most devastating gift of all. On Christmas Eve, I drove back to Dad's house, my heart pounding but my hands steady. I arrived at 7 in the morning, early enough that I knew they'd just be waking up. The house looked perfect from the outside. White lights strung along the gutters, a wreath on the door, snow dusting the lawn like something from a greeting card. I walked up those same porch steps, remembering how I'd walked down them in shame just days ago. But this time felt different. This time I wasn't begging. I knocked firmly. Dad answered in his bathrobe, coffee mug in hand, looking annoyed at the early interruption. When he saw me, his expression hardened. "Natalie, I thought we were clear about the arrangement." "We were," I said calmly. "I'm not here to argue about the fee." He seemed surprised by my composure. "Then why are you here?" I held out the gift bag. "I brought you something. Consider it my contribution to the family." He looked suspicious but took the bag. Diana appeared behind him, wrapping her robe tighter. "What's going on?" "Just delivering a gift," I said pleasantly. "Open it privately, Dad. I think you'll find it interesting." I turned to leave, but he grabbed my arm. "Wait. What is this?" "Open it and find out." I pulled free gently. "Merry Christmas." I walked back to my car, feeling his eyes on my back. I didn't look behind me as I drove away. I went back to Cassie's apartment and tried to distract myself with a movie, but I couldn't focus. My phone sat on the coffee table like a bomb waiting to explode. Took 2 hours. 2 hours before Dad called. I stared at his name on my screen, letting it ring 3 times before I answered. "Hello." His voice was tight, controlled. "We need to talk. Now." "About what?" I kept my tone neutral. "You know exactly what. This folder you gave me. Where did you get these documents?" "From your office. You asked me to help you organize, remember? I was just being thorough." I photograph important papers in case originals get lost. Silence. I could hear him breathing, could imagine him standing in his office with the door locked, Diana knocking and asking what was wrong. This is blackmail, he finally said. No, I corrected gently. Blackmail would be threatening to report you unless you give me something. I'm not threatening anything. I'm just showing you what I found. What you do with that information is up to you. What do you want? The defeat in his voice was almost satisfying. Almost. I want what I've always wanted, Dad. To be treated like I matter. To be welcomed home without having to pay for the privilege. He was quiet for a long time. Come over tonight. We'll talk. When I arrived at the house that evening, Dad opened the door without mentioning any fee. Diana stood in the hallway, arms crossed, looking between us with suspicion. What's happening? She asked. Why are you acting so strange? Dad ignored her and led me to his office, closing the door. The folder sat on his desk, papers spread out like evidence at a crime scene. How long have you had these? He asked, not looking at me. Once. I didn't know what to do with them at first. I didn't want to believe you'd actually claimed me when I wasn't living here. It's complicated, he started, but I cut him off. No, it's not. It's actually very simple. You committed tax fraud. Maybe unintentionally at first, but you kept doing it year after year. His face went red. You don't understand the pressure I was under. The business was struggling. Diana's kids needed. Diana's kids aren't my responsibility. The words burst out of me louder than I intended. I was your kid first, Dad. I was the one who needed you after Mom died, and you replaced me like I was furniture you didn't want anymore. He looked shocked, like he'd never considered it from my perspective. Like my pain had never even registered. Diana knocked on the door. Everything okay in there? Fine, Dad called out, his voice strained. Give us a minute. We sat in heavy silence, the truth hanging between us like smoke. Finally, Dad slumped in his chair, suddenly looking much older than his 53 years. I don't know when it happened, he said quietly. When I stopped seeing you as my daughter and started seeing you as a reminder of everything I lost. The admission cracked something inside me. I lost her too, Dad. I lost Mom too, and then I lost you. His eyes were red when he finally looked at me. I know. God, Natalie, I know. And I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough this time. I kept my voice steady even though emotions were rioting inside me. You humiliated me on Christmas. You put a price on my place in this family. That's not something you just apologize away. What do you want me to do? I thought about this. I'd spent days thinking about exactly what I wanted. I want you to stop treating me like an outsider. No more fees, no more conditions. And I want you to make this right with the IRS before they catch it themselves. He flinched. If I amend those returns, there'll be penalties. Maybe even an investigation. Better than the alternative, I said. And honestly, you deserve the consequences. He couldn't argue with that. We both knew it was true. For a long moment he just stared at the papers on his desk, probably calculating the cost of his mistakes. Okay, he finally said. Hey, I'll fix it. When we came out of the office, Diana and the kids were waiting in the living room. The Christmas tree lights cast everything in a warm glow that felt false, like stage lighting. Diana stood up immediately. Someone better tell me what's going on. Dad looked at me, then at his wife. I made mistakes. With my taxes with Natalie. I'm going to fix them. What mistakes? Diana's voice went sharp. What are you talking about? I watched as Dad explained, his voice halting and defensive. I watched Diana's face cycle through confusion, anger, and finally calculation. She was figuring out what this would cost them, how it would affect her comfortable life. Tyler and Bethany looked between their parents and me, trying to understand the adult drama unfolding. Part of me felt bad for involving them. But another part of me thought maybe they needed to see that actions have consequences even for parents. So let me get this straight, Diana said coldly. You've been claiming Natalie as a dependent for years when she wasn't living here? And now we have to pay penalties because she found out. The way she said she found out made it sound like I was the problem, not Dad's fraud. Diana, Dad started, but I interrupted. He committed fraud. I gave him the chance to fix it quietly. Would you prefer I went straight to the IRS? That shut her up, at least temporarily. Christmas dinner was the most awkward meal of my life. We sat around Diana's perfectly decorated table, eating ham that probably cost more than my weekly grocery budget, surrounded by tension thick enough to cut. Tyler kept looking at me with something like admiration which surprised me. Bethany mostly stared at her plate. Diana made passive-aggressive comments about family loyalty and airing dirty laundry. Dad was quiet, pushing food around his plate like a scolded child. For the first time in years, I wasn't the one being punished at this table. The shift in power was dizzying. So, Tyler finally said, breaking a long silence, "Are we just going to pretend everything's normal, or are we going to talk about what happened?" Diana shot him a warning look. "Tyler, this isn't your concern." "She's my sister," he said, and the words surprised all of us. "Half-sister whatever. And Dad treated her like garbage. I'm pretty sure that's my concern." I blinked back sudden tears. I'd never expected Tyler to defend me. He'd always been Diana's golden boy, the son who could do no wrong. "I appreciate that," I said softly. "But this is between me and your dad." "No," Tyler insisted. "It's not. We've all watched him treat you differently for years. We just never said anything because it was easier not to." Diana's face went hard as stone. "Tyler, that's enough." After dinner, Dad asked to speak with me alone again. We went out to the back porch where fairy lights were strung across the railing and snow was starting to fall. "I've been thinking about what Tyler said," Dad began. "About treating you differently. He's right." "I know he is," I said. "I've known for years. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you fight harder to stay in my life?" The question stunned me. "Because I shouldn't have to fight for my own father's love, Dad. That's not how it's supposed to work." He had no answer to that. We stood in the cold, watching snowflakes drift down, and I wondered if this was the closest we'd come to healing. It felt fragile this moment. Like one wrong word could shatter it completely. "I'll make the amendments next week," he said finally. "And I'll pay whatever penalties come. You're right, I deserve the consequences." "Thank you," I said and meant it. "But Natalie?" He turned to look at me. "What happens now? With us?" I considered the question carefully. "That depends on you. On whether you can actually change or if this is just you being scared of the IRS. He flinched but didn't argue. Because we both knew there was truth in my words. Fear was a powerful motivator, but it didn't always lead to lasting change. "I want to try," he said. "To be better. To be the father I should have been." "Then try," I told him simply. "And we'll see." I didn't stay at Dad's house that night. I drove back to Cassie's apartment feeling drained but strangely lighter. Like I'd been carrying a weight for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. Cassie was waiting up with hot chocolate and questions. I told her everything. The confrontation, the dinner, Tyler's unexpected defense of me. "So what now?" she asked. "Do you think he'll actually change?" "I don't know," I admitted. Part of me wants to believe him. Part of me knows that people don't really change, they just get better at hiding who they are. That's cynical even for you. Maybe. Or maybe it's realistic. I wrapped my hands around the warm mug. But I gave him a chance. That's more than he gave me. My phone buzzed with a text. From Tyler. "I'm sorry I never said anything before. You deserved better." I showed Cassie, feeling that warmth in my chest again. Maybe not everything was broken. Maybe some relationships could be salvaged from the wreckage. I texted back, "Thank you for speaking up tonight. It meant a lot." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, Diana's pissed. She's saying you're trying to ruin the family. But Dad told her to stop. I've never seen him stand up to her before. Well, that was something at least. The week between Christmas and New Year's was strange. Dad called me 3 times, which was 3 times more than he'd called in the previous 6 months. He asked about my new job, about whether I'd found an apartment yet, about things he'd never bothered to ask before. I answered cautiously, waiting for the catch. Waiting for him to ask for something or reveal this was all manipulation. But he didn't. He just talked. Awkwardly, stilted, like someone learning a language they'd forgotten. It would have been funny if it wasn't so sad. Diana, on the other hand, went silent. No calls, no texts, no performative friendliness. I wondered what conversations were happening in their house, what arguments were echoing through those perfect rooms. Tyler texted me regularly now, sending memes and complaining about Diana's mood swings. It was nice having a brother. even if it took a family crisis to get here. On New Year's Eve, Dad called with an update. I met with my accountant. We're filing the amendments next week. He says the penalties shouldn't be too bad given the circumstances. That's good, I said, meaning it. Natalie. His voice got softer. Thank you. For not going nuclear on this. For giving me a chance to fix it. You're still my dad, I told him. I don't want to destroy you. I just want you to see me. I heard him exhale shakily. I see you. I promise I see you now. But promises are easy. Follow through is hard. In February, Dad filed the amended tax returns. In March, he got a letter from the IRS requesting additional documentation and imposing penalties totaling $8,000. Diana lost her mind. I wasn't there when it happened, but Tyler called me in tears, saying his mom was screaming about how I'd ruined everything, how I was selfish and vindictive. She wants Dad to contest it, Tyler said. To say the returns were correct and fight it. My stomach dropped. That would be perjury. That would make everything so much worse. I know. I told them that. Dad knows it too. But Diana's saying the penalties are too high, that we can't afford it. I thought about the $300 entry fee. About how Dad could afford that kind of power play but was suddenly broke when facing consequences. What's Dad saying? He's standing firm. He told Diana this is his mess and he'll handle it. She's threatening to leave him. Maybe she would. Maybe this would blow up Dad's second marriage the same way Mom's death had blown up our family. Maybe destruction was just the Parker family legacy. But that wasn't my fault. I refused to carry that guilt. Tell Dad I'm here if he needs to talk, I said. But tell Diana I'm done being her scapegoat. Tyler's voice got stronger. I'll tell her. And Natalie, I'm proud of you. For standing up for yourself. In April I moved into my own apartment. Nothing fancy. A one-bedroom in a complex near the community center. But it was mine. No couch surfing, no charity, no strings attached. Dad helped me move. He showed up with Tyler and a rental truck, looking uncomfortable but determined. We moved boxes in silence at first, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Diana didn't come. She'd barely spoken to me since the tax situation exploded. Bethany came, though, surprising everyone. She helped me unpack kitchen stuff and told me quietly that she thought what Diana said about me wasn't fair. I'm glad you stood up to Dad, she said, arranging mugs in my cabinet. Someone needed to. After everyone left, Dad lingered at the door. This is a good place, he said, looking around. I'm glad you found it. Thanks for helping today. He nodded, then hesitated. Diana and I are in counseling. She's still angry, but we're working through it. That's good, I said, not sure I meant it. I need you to know something, Natalie. He met my eyes fully, no deflection. What I did to you at Christmas with the taxes, all of it, that wasn't about you. It was about my own guilt and anger that I never dealt with after your mom died. I know, I said. Because I did know. I'd always known. But understanding why doesn't erase what happened. I know. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking for a chance to build something new. That summer, Dad paid off the IRS penalties. It took him 4 months and he had to dip into savings and take a loan against his business. Diana was furious, her comfortable lifestyle cramped by the financial strain. Their counseling apparently wasn't going well. Tyler told me they were sleeping in separate bedrooms, barely speaking. Part of me felt guilty for triggering this collapse. Part of me felt nothing at all. Dad started coming to Sunday dinners at my apartment. Just him, sometimes Tyler. We'd order pizza and watch baseball, not talking about anything heavy. Just existing in the same space without warfare. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't healing. But it was something. One Sunday, Dad brought old photo albums. Pictures of me as a kid, of Mom, of our family before everything fell apart. I want you to have these, he said. I've been holding on to them, but they're really yours. We looked through them together, crying over photos of Mom making pancakes, of Dad carrying me on his shoulders, of Christmases when family didn't require a cover charge. I miss her, I whispered. Every day I miss her. Me too, Dad said. I thought I was protecting myself by pushing you away. I thought if I didn't look at you I wouldn't see her. But all I did was lose you both. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. And maybe it was enough to start rebuilding on. By Christmas, a full year after the doorway incident, Everything had changed. Dad and Diana were separated officially. He'd moved into a small condo near his office. Tyler was living with him, having chosen his father's side of the split. Bethany stayed with Diana, caught in the middle of a divorce that probably would have happened eventually anyway. I wasn't the cause of their marriage ending. I was just the catalyst that exposed all the cracks. Dad invited me to spend Christmas at his new place. Just him, Tyler, and me. No fees, no conditions, no performance art. We decorated a small tree together, ate Chinese takeout, and watched old movies. It was nothing like Diana's perfect, expensive Christmases. But it felt real in a way those never had. "This is nice," I said, curled up on Dad's second-hand couch. "Yeah," he agreed. "It is." Tyler fell asleep during the second movie, sprawled out in the recliner. Dad covered him with a blanket, then sat back down next to me. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" "For not giving up on me completely. For giving me a chance to be better." I thought about all the pain of the past year. The humiliation, the confrontation, the family explosion. About how that single Christmas morning had changed the trajectory of everything. "You gave me no choice," I told him honestly. "You pushed me so far I had to push back or lose myself completely." As I drove home that night, snow falling softly on the windshield, I thought about revenge and justice and the thin line between them. About whether I'd been right to confront Dad with those tax documents, or if I'd just been cruel. The truth was somewhere in the middle, like most truths are. I'd been hurt and angry and desperate to matter. He'd been cruel and careless and lost in his own pain. We'd both made choices that led us to that doorway moment. But unlike him, I'd chosen truth over silence. I'd chosen to stand up rather than disappear. And maybe that was the difference between revenge and justice. Whether you were tearing someone down or demanding they build themselves back up. My phone rang. "Mrs. Patterson, my boss at the community center. Natalie, I have news. The board approved your proposal for the youth mentorship program. You're going to be running it. A promotion. A chance to help kids who felt forgotten like I'd felt. A chance to make meaning from all this pain." "That's amazing," I said, tears suddenly blurring my vision. "Thank you." After we hung up, I sat in my apartment parking lot, letting the joy and grief and exhaustion wash over me. This year had broken me down and built me back up. It had cost me the fantasy of a perfect family but given me something more valuable: self-respect. 2 years later, Dad and I had something approaching a real relationship. We texted regularly, had dinner every other week, and he'd even started coming to events for my mentorship program. He'd sold his contracting business and started working for someone else. Less stress, more stability. He looked healthier than he had in years, like releasing the need to control everything had freed him. Diana remarried quickly to a dentist from Savannah. Bethany came to visit sometimes, maintaining relationships with both sides of her fractured family. Tyler lived with Dad and was applying to colleges. As for me, I'd been promoted to assistant director at the community center. I'd published an article about financial literacy for young adults. I'd built a life I was proud of, one that didn't depend on anyone's approval but my own. Sometimes people asked if I regretted confronting Dad that Christmas. If I wished I'd handled it differently, more gently. I always said no. 'Cause